Jai Jinendra and Pranam. My name is Ria, and today's presentation is about the Jain basis of harm reduction. Just letting you all know this topic is potentially sensitive, so please don't feel pressured to stay on for this presentation. And on the next slide, I have a little bit more. So in a second, I'll actually explain what harm reduction is, but first I'm going to give you some context on how it can be applied. So right now, America is in the middle of an opioid crisis, and since the early 90s, there's been a significant uptick in the circulation of opioids, which are very strong painkillers that, under the wrong circumstances, can depress someone's system and kill them. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. And every day, hundreds of lives are lost to opioid-related overdoses. And on the next slide, in 2022 alone, over 100,000 lives were lost to opioid use. And this was over 150% increase from the mortality rate of 2019. And quite evidently, we are experiencing a heartbreaking problem. And one that previous methods can't fix. The criminalization of substance use does nothing but perpetuate systemic racism and incarceration. And teaching people to just say no to drugs simply doesn't work. And that's what brings us to harm reduction. So harm reduction is an ethical method that seeks to minimize drug-related deaths. And it accepts the fact that people will continue to use drugs regardless of their legal, ethical, or economic circumstances. And instead works to keep people who use substances safe and alive. And harm reduction isn't limited to drug use. This is why I have a little helmet on this slide. And on the next slide, I have a little explanation. So harm reduction refers to any action that we take to minimize a risk or harm to ourselves. So outside of drug use, we're talking about things like seatbelts, helmets, sunscreen. And then in terms of opioid use, we have the distribution of naloxone, which is the opioid overdose reversal agent. We have things like clean needle or syringe exchange programs so that people that use drugs can eliminate added risks of disease transmission. And then we have the distribution of things like fentanyl test strips so that people can make sure that nothing lethal is in their drugs. And the more that we think about it, Jainism is actually backing this entire method. And on the next slide, I have some examples. So here are three principles of Jainism that are pretty central to harm reduction. The first one is satya. So satya is applied when we're thinking about the fact that this is our reality. This is a crisis and conventional methods are failing. And when we accept this, we are one step closer to actually addressing the problem. And then karuna comes into play. Karuna is the basis of this entire method because this method is one of compassion. And it seeks out to help the human beings and not stigmatize the labels or numbers. And then in terms of ahimsa, any inaction on preventable suffering perpetuates forms of violence. And that's obviously something that Jainism stands against. And then on the next slide, I have another example. So Paraspara Pagraho Jivanam is basically the idea that all living beings have souls, and these souls are intertwined, and that we render service to the souls that are around us. And so we are required to support other people and make sure that they are okay, even if maybe we don't agree with their circumstances or their circumstances seem as a form of danger. And then on the last slide, I have one final example. So a famous teaching of Mahavir Swami is to live and let live. As souls, we must learn to coexist and be at peace with each other. And this means that we don't stigmatize people, we don't shame or berate them, and we don't allow them to cause harm to themselves or others. And that's the end of my little flash talk. Thank you, and Michhami Dukkadam. Yeah, thank you.